These days we're focusing on larger and larger screens in our smartphones, and that's not a bad thing. It seems that consumers really want larger screens in their phones from what studies have told us, and what the sales numbers represent is that people want larger screens on their devices. But what about the little guy? Hey guys, my name is Ryan Thomas with Failtech, and these are the big problems with small smartphones. Whilst you can buy some decent used devices such as the iPhone SE, it's not the latest in terms of specification and feature set, making it kind of redundant. However, I'd call the SE a super compact. Compact phones such as the iPhone 8, Sony XZ2 Compact, and Pixel 2 exist, but compared to the larger mainstream variants, the selection is a lot smaller with limited features. Recently, brands like Apple and Google have done more to implement OIS, wireless charging, and lack of headphone jack, but things like dual lenses, bezel-less designs, and QHD displays are lacking in the smaller variants. Are they deal breakers? No, but some like the luxury, but just wished for a smaller form factor. If I could get a compact S9 or iPhone 10 in like a 4.7 to 5-inch form factor, that would be great. Limited specs. From the current compacts on the market, the specs aren't great, and I don't mean like iPhone 8 or Pixel 2 or XZ2 Compact. I mean, if you don't want to spend over £300, because when we drop this low in price, specs don't just fall by 20% or so, but it becomes near impossible to find a good 720p display, let alone a 1080p one. 512 to 1GB of RAM is the norm, no microSD expansion, low internal storage, and no fingerprint scanners. Of course, I recommend buying used, but for those who don't want to buy used, it makes it difficult to recommend the 5S, the SE, and the Z5 Compact, as those are best at their used condition. I recommend them, but a lot of people want the latest specs. Yes, 4.7-inch high-end devices do exist, but nothing at 4 inches these days. Bad battery life. Here's the big blow, battery life. Since it is physically difficult to cram a large battery into a small chassis, it makes it near impossible to get anything larger than 2700 mAh in a phone at 4.7 inches. And whilst one might find that to be acceptable given that the screen and specs are lower end, I would love to see a compact phone with like a 3500 mAh, as because the phone is smaller in surface area, adding a few millimeters to depth really would be happily accepted in my opinion. You'll often see that stepping up to the XL, Plus, or otherwise larger versions of modern day devices increases battery life substantially, despite the usual higher end parts. And that's because as much as we can do with efficiency, nothing beats a nice big battery. When I think of this, the S7 Edge and P20 Pro come to mind, as they are both relatively packed with battery compared to similarly sized counterparts. Both rinse in competition in battery life, even if they aren't the most efficient or optimized devices. Cluttered screens. Let's talk about the displays themselves, not the specs, no resolutions, panel types, screen to body ratios, no pixels per inch figures. Let's talk about usability. This is something that most people will overlook and something that makes a world of difference, but the screen clutter and overall density of the assets on the display will drastically degrade the experience to the point where it may appear slower even if it isn't. See, assets such as text, images, and UI buttons have to be a certain size to be sharp enough to look, well, good. And if they're too small, they can look fuzzy and blurry and, well, not good. But due to this conflict, a button may take up a larger portion of the display, which is great for that one button, but it intrudes on the rest of the content on the display. Just look at how the 6B shows heaps more content than the iPhone 10, which shows heaps more content than the 5S. Screen to body ratios. The next point is one that Callum brought up earlier. The screen to body ratios of most of these compact phones aren't very good, and they're much worse than their siblings. Just look at these examples. Okay, the XZ2 Compact doesn't look too bad, but it's still below the magical 80 mark where devices tend to start looking more, well, 2018-y. I personally don't mind because I'd rather have something more ergonomic than fancy looking, but it's something that a lot of consumers have voiced that they want, smaller bezels. In conclusion, we need to see a larger selection of smaller smartphones, and I don't mean budget. We've seen the likes of the XL, Plus, and larger models of the things like the iPhone 8, the Pixel, and any Sony phone. But what about other devices, and why can't we go below that 4.6-inch form factor, because that is where a lot of people still prefer their devices to be. And that's it from me, guys. Thank you so much for your continued support. It's been amazing. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons, because without you guys, this would be harder to do. It really does help push the channel forward, so I really thank you for that. Also, please do leave a like, dislike, comment, subscribe if you're new around here to never miss a video like this one. Also, check out my social media because it helps me out and we can start a conversation over there as well. My name is Ryan Thomas with Failtech, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.